In a previous video, I went into detail about the charter school hustle, and some people took a little offense to some of the things I was saying in the charter school hustle. Now, a lot of people think that charter schools are better than public schools, and I have family members in education who will tell you that there is no difference between a charter school education and a public school education. The only difference between a public school and a charter school is the direction of the dollars. When it comes down to your public schools, they get their government money from the federal government to the state government. Now, in your charter school, we have these same federal dollars which are allocated per child being sent to a private institution. And that's the only difference between a public school and a charter school. And what makes the charter school hustle a hustle is that it's a way of getting federal government dollars into private enterprises' hands. That's all the whole case for charter schools is. It's not about giving people school choice, because if we look at the direction of charter schools in a place like here in New York City, we're getting more and more of them in public school buildings. So instead of giving people the school choice and the competition that people said that they thought they were going to get from this whole charter school mandate, which was passed in the No Child Left Behind law, we're instead getting a monopoly starting to form up with private enterprise taking the place of public schools. Unfortunately, most Americans are just completely clueless to the subtle politics transpiring around them. Many people are so caught up in the emotion and the cult-like mindset of these charter schools that they cannot see the direction of the dollars, or that their children are getting the exact same education but at a higher price. It's just the definition of insanity. Unfortunately, most Americans are completely clueless because they are just caught up in the hysteria of charter schools and the promise of better when it's actually the same. Because in both environments, you get the same type of materials from providers like your Lucy Calkins, your Rigby, and many others that are featured in your Lakeshore catalog. They get the same resources, the same funding, and the same type of sponsorship. However, the only difference between these environments is that there is no teachers union to provide job security for teachers, and that most workers in your charter schools are horribly underpaid. Even worse, there is no real job security. A teacher can be pretty much fired for any arbitrary reason that one of these charter school directors feels. So there's really no sense of accountability or standards in your charter school, but a lot of people believe that there are standards. And a lot of people caught up in their emotions are running to these charter schools thinking that they're better, but they really aren't. And they're sitting there thinking because they had to go into a lottery to get this child into this school that they've won some sort of success, some sort of wonderful thing, when they have not won any sort of wonderful thing. What you've won is a booby prize where you're going to get the exact same education but at a higher price, and the same result, a dysfunctional child. Because when we look at your whole education system in America, it is completely backwards, especially when we compare it to other parts of the world. And the big problem with the American education system doesn't really have to do with teachers or schools. It really has to do with the complete collapse of the American family. And that's what's been transpiring over the last 40 years. The American family has completely collapsed. And this is the subject that no politician or educator wants to touch, because they're afraid of offending large voting blocs. They're afraid of offending large consumer blocs. They're afraid of telling the American people that the way we raise children is pretty much messing them up. And the households that they're coming out of is the reason why they can't get educated, the reason why they perform so poorly in school. These families have completely collapsed, but the American people don't want to hear that. What they want to be told is what they want to hear, which is why charter schools are so popular today, because your charter school pretty much tells people what they want to hear. It tells the kids that they're doing good. It tells the parents that they're doing good. It puts a whole lot of flash in front of the parent and never, presents substance to them, just like your public schools do these days. And no one wants to admit that their education system is completely, a wreck. They just want to dress it up with ribbons and bows, not wanting to address the serious issues that go on in your public schools and your charter schools. And that's part of the hustle, because most Americans are in denial about their education system. They think going from a public to a charter is going to be better, but again, it's only smoke and mirrors. It's about the flow of those dollars. Those dollars are now going from a public institution to a private institution. And the private institution is pretty much spending the dollars the same way the public institution was. And even worse, there is no sense of accountability. There is no real sense of standards. And many of these schools pretty much, again, produce the same type of dysfunctional individual when it's time to take that individual out of the K through 12 system and put them in the college system. Because I have a family member who works in a college, and they teach a class, and they have to deal with these students, whether they be public or charter, and they pretty much fall apart. And they fall apart in public colleges, where then the public college's standard is a lot lower than the private college. Now, if I took the same individual who went to one of these charter schools or these public schools these days, and I put them in a university like a Columbia University or Fordham University, they're not going to last longer than about 2-3 weeks before they start falling apart. And the reason why they fall apart, again, is because of the homes many of these people come out of. Most of the homes these days do not take education seriously. Most people are more interested in social currency than education. And that's why they do so poorly in school, because they want the social currency that an education gets them. They want the social currency of going to school. They want the A's on their paper. They want the praise from the teachers, and they want the accolades, but they don't value the work that goes into getting an education. And when it comes down to education, you only get what you put in. Unfortunately, most Americans don't want to put any effort into their education. They want a quick fix. They want gimmicks. They want tricks. And then they get upset when they wind up not getting the quality education they thought they were supposed to get. You only get what you put in, and you have to put in maximum effort to get maximum results. It's just like a bodybuilder. A bodybuilder understands he cannot go out here and eat donuts and cakes and then expect to have a six-pack. He understands he has to eat lean protein. He has to take supplements. He has to eat vitamins. He has to exercise. In order to get that six-pack and that toned body, he has to do work. Most Americans don't want to do the work when it comes down to the American education system. They want easy work. They want quick fix work. They want dumbed down work. And then we want smart people, and it does not work that way. And all we do with these charter schools is give people the same dumbed down curriculums in a brand new wrapper. And then we try to make it look like we're trying to educate ourselves. And that's not the case at all. Again, when it comes down to education, you have to put it in your own hands. And that means, in addition to the school, you have to supplement that education. That means your kids have to read, and the parents have to read to them. So when they're little, you have to read to them to foster a culture of value of education. And that's the big problem in America. No one values education. They value the social currency they get from it. They value getting those A's on those papers. They value the graduation from the diploma. They value going to the big university. And they value getting the degree from the big university to get the big job so they can go make money to get more social currency. But they don't value education. This is why Americans wind up dead last when it comes down to education. And they always fall for these hustles because they want that quick fix. And fixing the education system, was not that hard from the get-go when we had all public schools. But most Americans, again, because they're too lazy to go do the work, don't want to take the responsibility. Now, every American will sit there and tell you they have a right to a free public education, but when you ask them to take responsibility for that free public education, they can't be found. When it's time to go to the open school night, when it's time to go out here to these PTA meetings, when it's time to go to these community board meetings and discuss things like school funding, These parents are absent, they're disappeared, they're pretty much off the face of the earth. But they'll sit there and say they want a quality education for their child, and it doesn't work that way. In order for you to get the child quality education, that requires an all-in. But most Americans don't want to make that type of commitment. They don't want to take that type of responsibility. And then they wonder why their kids wind up, dead last, and why the United States is dead last when it comes down to education, because we don't take education seriously, we don't maintain any standards, and then we fall for gimmicks like your charter school, which are pretty much doing the exact same things as public schools, because they are fudging the grades of your children, telling you what you want to hear. Some cases they're erasing grades off standardized tests and then filling them in and then making it look like the school is doing so well. However, when you take one of these children aside and ask them some basic questions like, what are the three branches of government? Who was the first president? What is the role of the vice president? Simple questions like that from a fourth grader or a seventh grader, you're going to see that the education they got was not that great, because I can answer those questions pretty much fairly easy, and I could answer them back when I was a kid, fairly easy. And I went to a regular public school, but the whole thing was I had parents that pretty much insisted that I focus on education, and I read on the regular on the side. I read things like comic books, regular books, and, I watched a lot of PBS and other things. These are things that you do to supplement your education. You cannot expect, a teacher to do all of that. Unfortunately, most Americans, this is the way they think. Their children are being left behind because the schools are terrible. But what the really reason why your children are being left behind is because you're not putting enough effort into educating your children. There's more to educating children than just sending them to a school. And that requires you being on top of that school, because the reason why that school is not getting the funding that it gets is because a lot of times a lot of parents are just sitting there, they're voting straight down Democratic tickets or Republican tickets, and they're not demanding that their congressmen go in here, their city councilmen go in here and get the funding for their schools. They're not going out here and demanding that they get the resources for their schools. And all of these resources, again, are federal funded dollars that every child gets because of that right to a free and public education. And if you don't ask for that, whether it be a public school or a charter school, you're not going to get it. If you don't ask for those extra resources, you're not going to get them. They are available. They were always available. Unfortunately, most Americans don't want to do the research. They don't want to do the heavy lifting. They don't want to go out here and make those efforts. And they fall for gimmicks like charter schools rather than going into their public school and making those demands. Those resources were always there for them. And because I had the family member who went to Teachers College and told me all about them. They're all out there. Unfortunately, most people, they'd rather go and worry about what Olivia Pope is doing on Scandal rather than focus on getting the resources that they need for their child, getting the tutoring, getting the extra help. They just don't want to do the work. And then they want to blame the teachers for failing the kids. But you have to put the work into teaching children. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. And people don't want to, again, do that heavy lifting. They don't want to do that research. They don't want to, get on these kids and tell them that, look, you're going to have to miss SpongeBob until you finish this homework, because this is more important. They don't want to read in front of their children. They want to read to their children. And then they wonder why their children, are underperforming in a public school. And then they don't want to deal with other things in the environment, like dysfunctional individuals from disruptive households. Like when you get to the junior high school and high school level, there are things that can be done. This child, yes, he has a right to a free and public education, but he does not have a right to bully people. And if 5 or 6 parents get together, these disruptive individuals can be removed from your public school. They can be placed in a place like a District 75 where they place disruptive individuals, and that can really make the learning environment safer. But a lot of people don't want to make those efforts. They don't understand, how the school system works, and they get mad and say the public system is falling apart. But if people don't put effort into the public school system, it won't be a quality education system. And if people don't put efforts into your charter school system, then it's not going to be a quality education system. The big problem with Americans in education is that Americans, again, do not value education. They only value the social currency they get from getting an education. They only look at the end result and they don't look at the process of education. Because if you look at the process of education and you understand that, you only get what you put in, then you're going to realize you have to put maximum effort to get maximum results. You cannot put in minimum effort and then expect to get maximum results. It's just not going to work, no matter what institution you put in. And all you're doing is changing the flow of the dollars when you go from a public school to a charter school. And if you're going to put in the same type of effort, you're going to get the same type of results. And I look at the American people, and again, they are just too lazy to step up and make their public schools the best places they can possibly be. All that takes is a little bit of effort. Coming in on open school nights, helping kids with their homework, going to PTA meetings. That wasn't that hard. But, most Americans, they'll sit there and do these exact same things with a charter school, all because it has a brand, it's giving you some sort of contract, nothing more than gimmicks on the outside to get you to do what you were supposed to be doing in the first place from the beginning. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.